junk came out of nowhere. One moment the small salvage ship was cutting quietly through empty space, and the next it was inside a storm of broken metal, spinning rocks, and shards of frozen fuel. Daniel Reyes gripped the arms of his chair and held on while the hull groaned around him. Alarms sang in every corner of the cabin. A chunk of old engine block slammed into his ship's side, and the whole thing shook like a can kicked down a street. Daniel was a salvage engineer. He fixed broken things and sold the useful pieces. He was used to danger, but this was worse than usual. His engines coughed, sparked, and then went silent. Now he was just a passenger, drifting wherever the storm pushed him. He watched the rocks slide past his window and tried to steer with the small side thrusters, tapping the controls with careful fingers. Slowly, the storm spat him out into a wide, dark field of asteroids. He knew this place by reputation, though he had never wanted to see it. Other spacers called it the Dragon's Graveyard. It was a forbidden zone, far from any trade route, a place people spoke about in low voices. Most thought the stories were nonsense meant to scare new pilots. Daniel had always thought the same. He did not think that anymore. His ship bumped against a floating slab of stone and stopped. Battery power kept the lights weak and yellow. He let out a long breath and began checking the damage. The engines needed hours of work. He would not die today, but he was stuck, and being stuck in a forbidden zone was its own kind of problem. Then he saw the light. It came from a huge shape ahead, a shape far too large to be another wreck. Daniel leaned close to the glass and squinted. What he saw made his mouth go dry. It was a creature, a living thing bigger than any ship he had ever built or robbed. It had a long body covered in scales that caught the weak starlight and threw it back in soft blue and silver. Great wings were folded against its sides, torn in places, bent in others. Its head was long and noble, and it hung low, as if the creature were too tired to lift it. Around its body ran thick chains. Heavy machines were bolted to its scales, and long metal drills pushed into its flesh. Daniel understood in a slow, cold rush what he was looking at. Someone had captured this thing. They had chained it to a mining rig and were pulling something out of its body. He could see the harvest tubes glowing as they carried away a stream of shining crystal, the famous crystal that powered half the galaxy. People called it dragon gold, and they paid fortunes for it. Daniel had heard the word all his life. He had never once stopped to wonder where it truly came from. Now he knew it came from this, from a living creature that hung in chains while a machine slowly bled it. He should have looked away. He should have fixed his engines and left the moment he could. That was the smart thing, the safe thing, but the creature moved. Just a small movement, a flinch as one of the drills bit deeper. And when it flinched, its great eye rolled toward him, and it saw him. Daniel felt that gaze go right through him, as if something ancient and hurting had reached across the dark and touched his chest. He sat very still. He had expected the eye of a beast, empty and wild. This was not that. There was a mind behind that eye. There was pain, and there was thought, and there was something that might have been a question. Daniel had spent his whole life around machines, and he had learned to trust his gut. His gut told him this was wrong, not dangerous, wrong. A crime happening right in front of him, so old and so normal that the whole galaxy had stopped noticing it. He looked at the mining rig's controls glowing beside the creature. His ship had drifted close enough that his docking arm could reach the harvester's outer panel. He knew machines. He could see how this one worked from here. He could see the switch that ran the drills. For a long moment he argued with himself. This was not his fight. He was one man in a broken ship. Whoever owned this rig would be rich and powerful and unkind. Touching it could get him killed. Then he looked at the eye again. It was still watching him, waiting. Daniel swore softly, unbuckled, and went to his docking controls. His hands moved on their own. He extended the arm, latched onto the harvester's panel, and pulled it open. Inside was a mess of wiring he understood better than he understood most people. He found the line that fed power to the pain drills and cut it. The drills stopped. The steady whine that he had barely noticed suddenly vanished, and the silence that followed felt huge. The creature's whole body seemed to loosen, just a little, like a fist opening after being clenched too long. Its eyes stayed on him. Daniel stared back through the glass, his heart pounding. "Okay," he said out loud, though no one could hear him. Okay, I don't know what I just did. He was about to turn back to his engines when he noticed something strange. His old translation array, a battered device he used to read alien salvage tags, had woken up on its own. A small green light blinked on its panel. It was picking up a signal, faint and slow and steady, coming from somewhere very close. The signal was not a warning, it was not machine noise. It repeated over and over, patient as a heartbeat, a single shape, a single pattern, almost like a word. Daniel leaned toward it and listened, and the creature in the chains watched him listen. 3 days passed, measured only by the ache in Daniel's back and the slow drain of his batteries. He worked on his engines in long, tired shifts, and the whole time the great chained creature hung close by his window, breathing slowly, watching. He had started talking to it on the second day, not because he thought it understood, but because the silence in the dragon's graveyard pressed on him like a heavy hand. A man alone will talk to anything. "Wires fried again," he muttered as he leaned into an open panel. "Whoever built this engine cut every corner they could find. I'd fire them if they weren't already long dead." The creature made a low sound in its chest, so deep that Daniel felt it in his teeth. He looked up. The sound came again, gentle, not angry. He almost smiled. "You listening to me complain? Fair enough. Not much else to do out here." The strange signal had not stopped. All 3 days, his old translation array kept blinking with the same slow, repeating pattern. At first Daniel had ignored it, too busy staying alive. But now, with the engines almost fixed and time on his hands, he pulled the array onto his workbench and opened it up. If something was trying to reach him, he wanted to know what. The array was old and half-broken, but he was good with old and half-broken things. He rebuilt the soundboard, cleaned the filters, and rewrote a chunk of its listening code. Bit by bit, the signal grew clearer. It was not random. It had shape. It rose and fell in the same way each time, like a word spoken over and over by a patient teacher to a slow student. Daniel played it out loud in the cabin. A soft, rolling sound filled the air, strange and beautiful. And the moment it played, the creature outside lifted its heavy head for the first time since he had arrived. Daniel froze. He looked from the array to the great eye at his window and back again. Slowly, understanding crept over him. "That's you," he said. "You're making that. You've been making it this whole time." He worked another full day to be sure. He tuned the array until the sound was crisp, and he studied the pattern the way he would study a broken machine, turning it over, testing it. He came to believe it was a single thing repeated, not a message, not a plea, one word, offered again and again. He thought it might be a name. The idea sat strangely in him. Everyone knew these creatures as beasts. Dragon gold came from dragons, and dragons were dumb animals, giant lizards of space that grew crystal in their guts. That was what the whole galaxy said. But dumb animals did not repeat one careful sound for days, hoping a stranger might learn it. Daniel practiced. He listened to the sound, then tried to shape it with his own voice. It was hard. Human throats were not made for it. He got it wrong many times, and each time the creature simply waited and played the sound again, endless and kind. It was, he realized, teaching him. A thing in chains, bleeding gold into a machine, was spending its strength to teach a small human its name. On the 5th day, he got it right. He looked up at the window, took a breath, and spoke the word aloud in his own rough voice. Orethan. The effect was like a bomb. The creature threw back its head, and a shudder ran the whole length of its body, so strong that it rattled the chains and shook loose stones across the asteroid. Daniel grabbed the edge of his bench. Sure, he had done something terrible, but it was not rage. He saw that at once. It was shock. Pure, deep shock, the way a person looks when they hear their own name after years of being called nothing. The translation array lit up, no longer with the single word, but with a flood of new patterns, faster and richer, pouring out all at once. Daniel scrambled to keep up, feeding the signal through his rebuilt filters, watching the machine turn thought into words he could read. The words came slowly at first, broken and strange, like a voice learning to speak through a wall. But they came. "You spoke it," the word said. "In all my long life, no one has ever spoken it." Daniel sat down hard. You can talk. We always could, came the answer. No one ever listened. To your kind we are treasure. To others we are meat, or monsters, or engines that grow fuel. We are the beast in the story, never the one who tells it. But you have a name, Daniel said. You have a name and you've been trying to give it to me for days. A name is not a sound, the dragon said. A name is proof that someone sees you. In 10,000 years you are the first to see me. My name is Orathan, and now you carry it. Daniel looked at the chains, the drills, the harvest tubes still faintly glowing. Anger built in him slowly, the quiet kind that does not shout but does not go away. Who did this to you? Powerful people, Orathan said. They call themselves a consortium. They harvest my kind across many worlds. They will not care that I can speak. They will care only that you have stopped their machine. When they return, they will not let you leave. Then I'll be gone before they come, Daniel said, but even as he said it, he looked at the chains again and knew he was lying to himself. You mean to free me, Orathan said. It was not a question. Daniel did not answer right away. He looked at the great tired eye, at the wounds, at the machine feeding on a living mind that had waited 10,000 years just to be seen. Yeah, he said at last, I think I do. They came with lights. Daniel was under his engine panel when the whole graveyard lit up around him, hard white beams cutting through the dark and sweeping across the asteroids. He crawled out fast, banged his head, and pulled himself to the window in time to see a huge ship slide into view. It was long and grey and heavy, built for hauling, with the cold shape of something that had done ugly work for a long time. They're back, he said. Sooner than I feared, Orathan answered through the array. The season's harvest. They come to take what the machine has gathered. The big ship slowed beside the mining rig. Smaller craft dropped from its belly like seeds and crossed the short distance to the harvester. Daniel watched them dock, watched figures move, and knew there was no hiding. His little salvage ship sat right there in the open, latched to a machine he had broken. A voice cut into his cabin, loud and sharp, taking over his old radio without asking. Unregistered vessel, you are docked to consortium property. You have tampered with a harvester. Identify yourself or be treated as a thief. Daniel breathed slowly, then he keyed the radio. Name's Daniel Reyes, salvage engineer. My ship broke down in the storm and drifted in here. I didn't come for your rig. There was a pause, then the voice came again, and this time it carried a face onto Daniel's cracked screen. A tall figure, sharp-featured, with cold eyes and fine clothes that did not belong on a mining ship. I am Counselor Bram. That harvester is worth more than your life and your ship together, and someone has switched off its drills. Was that someone you? That was me, Daniel said. No point lying about wires he had cut with his own hands. Bram's face did not change, but his eyes did. Then you have cost me money, engineer. That is a serious thing, but I am a reasonable man. You look poor and stupid rather than truly guilty. Restart the drills, apologize, and I will pay you well to forget you were ever here. A fortune, in fact. Enough to buy 10 ships like your sad little one. All you must do is walk away. It was a good offer. Daniel knew it was a good offer. A poor man did not hear numbers like that twice in a lifetime. He looked at the tall, cold man on his screen, and then he looked at the great chained creature at his window, at the wounds and the tired eye and the name he now carried in his chest. No, Daniel said. Bram blinked, as if the word did not fit in his ears. No. The thing you've got chained up there, Daniel said, it isn't a beast. It thinks, it talks, it has a name. Bram almost laughed. It grows crystal, engineer, that is all it does. Daniel reached over and keyed the translation array into the radio line. Then he spoke, slow and clear, so every soul on that grey ship would hear him. Orathan. The creature answered. Its head lifted, and the array turned its deep voice into words that poured out across every open channel. I am Orathan. I have lived 10,000 years. I have watched your kind chain my kind and call us gold. I am not gold. I am a person, and this human is the first who ever asked my name. Silence fell over the radio. On Daniel's screen, he could see figures behind Bram go still. For one long moment, no one moved. Then Bram's face hardened into something ugly. "A trick," he said. "A clever recording from a clever thief. It changes nothing. The beast grows crystal, and crystal is money, and money does not care what noises it makes." But not everyone agreed. Daniel's screen split as another figure pushed into view behind Bram, a lean alien with wide dark eyes and a scout's plain uniform. She stared at the image of Orathan with a look Daniel knew well, because he had worn it himself only days ago. It was the look of someone seeing a truth they had spent years pretending not to see. "Counselor," she said quietly. It answered to a name. Machines do not answer to names. Animals do not learn one word for days to teach a stranger. "Be quiet, Nala," Bram snapped. But Nala did not look away from the screen. Daniel filed her face and her name away in his mind. One person on that ship had heard him. One was enough to start with. Bram turned from her, and his voice dropped into something colder and final. "Enough of this. Restart the drills, engineer. Run them at full power. Let us see how poetic our treasure feels when the crystal is pulled twice as fast." "You'll kill it," Daniel said. "It will grow more," Bram answered. "It always does, and you will watch, and you will learn what happens to people who cost me money." The harvester lit up. Daniel had cut the pain line, but Bram's crew rerouted it from their end, and there was nothing Daniel could do from his broken ship. The drills spun up, faster than before, and drove deep. Orathan's roar was terrible. It shook the graveyard and filled Daniel's cabin and rang in his bones. He shouted, useless, his hands flat against the glass. Then armored figures were crossing to his ship. They cut through his airlock, dragged him out of his cabin, and pulled him across open space to the grey hauler. He fought, but he was one thin engineer against soldiers, and they were not gentle. They threw him into a cold cell and left him in the dark. He lay there breathing hard, his ears still full of Orathan's cry. Then, in the black, a soft sound came at the door, a quiet click. His restraints loosened around his wrists and fell away. He looked up. Through the small window in the cell door, two wide dark eyes watched him. "Nala," she said nothing. She only met his gaze for a moment, pressed a finger to her mouth, and slipped away into the dark. Bram came to the cell himself, hours later. He did not open the door. He stood on the other side of the small window with his hands folded behind his back and looked at Daniel the way a man looks at a stain on his coat. "You puzzle me, engineer," Bram said. "I have met many species, proud ones, greedy ones, cruel ones. All of them, when they found my dragons, did the same thing. They took the gold. The strong ones took it by force. The clever ones took it by trade. Not one of them ever stopped to talk to the beast. Then a broken human in a broken ship drifts into my harvest, and the first thing he does is cut my drills to spare a creature he will never sell. Why?" Daniel sat against the cold wall, rubbing his sore wrists. He was tired and afraid, but Bram had asked a real question, and he found he wanted to answer it. "Because it looked at me," Daniel said, "and I looked back, and there was somebody home." "Sentiment," Bram said, "weakness dressed as kindness." "Maybe," Daniel said, "but you asked why humans are strange, so I'll tell you. We name things, that's the whole trick. We can't help it. We name our ships, our tools, our animals, the storms that try to kill us. We find a rock floating in the dark, and we give it a name before we've even landed on it. When you name a thing, you stop being able to pretend it's nothing. That's why your people never talked to the dragons. You didn't want to name them, because the moment you do, you can't call them gold anymore." Bram was quiet for a while. "A pretty speech," he said at last. "It will not save you or the beast." He turned and walked away, his boots ringing down the metal hall. But Daniel had not spent that speech for nothing. While he talked, his eyes had never stopped moving. He had studied the cell, the door, the panel beside it, the way the wires ran along the ceiling. He was a salvage engineer. Ships gave up their secrets to him whether they wanted to or not. And a mining hauler was just a ship, old and cheaply built, with corners cut in every wall. When Bram was gone, Daniel got to work. The loose restraints Nala had freed became tools in his hands. He pried the cover off the panel beside the door and looked into the tangle of wiring inside. It was crude work, the kind he could read in his sleep. Within an hour, he had the door talking to him, and soon after that he had it open. The hall outside was empty. He moved quietly, following the hum of the ship toward its heart. He knew what he was looking for. If he could reach the harvester's control core, the machine that ran the drills through Orethan's body, he could do more than free himself. He could turn the whole thing off from the inside. He found the core room by the sound. Even here, deep in the hauler, he could hear the drills through the walls, and under that sound, faint and terrible, Orethan's steady pain. It drove him faster. The control core was a wide bank of machines humming behind a locked door. Daniel opened the lock the same way he had opened the cell. Inside, screens glowed with readings, numbers climbing as the crystal poured out of the dragon and into the consortium's tanks. He set to work at once, not to smash the machine, but to lie to it. He fed the core false readings. He made the screens show that the dragon was failing fast, its crystal thinning, its body close to death. If Bram believed the beast was dying, he would pull the drills back to save his investment. It would buy Orethan time. It might buy them all a chance. He was deep in the wiring when the door slid open behind him. He spun, ready to fight, and found Nala standing there. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Nala stepped inside and shut the door. "I heard what you said to Bram," she said. Her voice was quiet and rough. "About names, about how we never talked to them because we didn't want to know." She looked at the screens, at the numbers, at the harvest she had helped gather for years. "I have flown scout for this consortium since I was young. I always told myself the dragons were only beasts. I told myself so many times that I stopped hearing the doubt." She looked at Daniel. "Then a human I have never met risks his life for one of them, and I cannot tell myself the lie anymore." She reached into her jacket and drew out a small heavy key. "This opens the master chains, the ones bolted straight to the rig. I stole it an hour ago. I did not know why I took it until now." Daniel took the key. It was warm from her hand. "Why help me?" he asked. "You'll lose everything." "Because you were right," Nala said simply. "Namming a thing means you can't pretend it's nothing. I have known that dragons chains for years. It is time I knew something else." Daniel finished feeding his lies into the core. On the screens, the false numbers dropped, and far off he heard the drills slow as an alarm somewhere warned the crew their treasure was dying. It was working. Together they slipped out of the core room and made their way toward the harvester itself, toward the place where the master chains held Orethan fast. The hauler shook with confused voices as the crew ran to save a dragon they thought was fadding. Daniel reached the great locking mechanism where the thickest chains met the rig. He gripped the key in one hand and with the other keyed the translation array he had carried out of his cell. He spoke into it, low and steady. "Orethan, hold on, I'm coming." Far above, chained and bleeding, the dragon heard its name, and with the last of its strength, it began to pull. The key turned, and the first great chain fell away. It dropped through open space, tumbling slow and heavy, and where it had held Orethan's foreleg, the scales were rubbed raw and scarred. Daniel worked fast, moving from lock to lock along the rig, Nala beside him watching the halls for crew. Each time a chain came loose, the dragon shifted, testing its freedom, gathering itself. Each time it seemed a little more alive. But the noise did not go unnoticed for long. Alarms had already been ringing from Daniel's false readings, and now the crew saw chains falling that should not fall. Boots thundered through the hauler. Voices shouted. And then Bram's voice rolled through every speaker on the ship, cold and shaking with fury. "The beast is loose. The engineer is loose. Find them. And if you cannot hold the dragon, then it does not leave. Do you hear me? If I cannot keep it, no one keeps it." Daniel's hands went still on the next lock. He looked at Nala. "What does that mean?" Her face had gone pale. "The harvester carries a charge, a last measure. If the consortium is ever about to lose a dragon, they blow the rig rather than let it go free. A dead asset is better than a freed one. Those are the rules I flew under for years." "He'll kill it," Daniel said. "He'll kill it just to keep anyone else from having it." "He will kill us with it," Nala said. Daniel turned back to the locks and worked faster than he ever had in his life. His fingers flew. The key bit into each mechanism, turned, released. Chains fell away one after another, drifting into the dark like dead snakes. Above him, Orethan strained harder, its wings shifting, its great body pulling against the last of its bonds. Somewhere in the rig, Daniel could hear a new sound rising under everything else. A low building whine, climbing higher, the charge waking up. Bram had given the order, and the machine was obeying. Last one, Daniel said. The final master chain was the thickest of all, a huge collar bolted straight through the harvester into Orethan's chest. It was the chain that held the drills in place, the one that fed on the dragon's heart. His hands shook as he fit the key. "Hurry," Nala breathed. The whine of the charge grew louder, filling the whole rig now, a scream of power about to let go. Daniel felt sweat run into his eyes. The key would not turn. The lock was old and jammed with the dragon's dried blood. He braced his feet, gripped with both hands, and threw all his weight against it. The lock broke, the final chain snapped free, and the drills tore out of Orethan's chest as the dragon reared back, at last, completely loose. "Go," Daniel shouted into the array. "Orethan, go, it's going to blow." But the dragon did not flee. It turned, quick as a shadow for something so vast, and swept toward the rig where Daniel and Nala clung. The whine reached its peak. The harvester began to come apart in a bloom of white fire, panel by panel, the whole rig folding into an explosion that would swallow everything near it. Orethan spread its torn wings wide and wrapped them around the two small figures. Daniel felt the world turn to fire and thunder. The blast slammed into the dragon's back, into the scales that had grown for 10,000 years, and Orethan took it all so that the humans and the alien beneath its wings took none. Then there was quiet and drifting and the slow spin of wreckage in the dark. Daniel opened his eyes. He was alive. Nala floated beside him, alive too, her eyes wide with something between fear and wonder. Around them, the great wings loosened and drew back, and Daniel looked up into the face of the freed dragon. Its scales were scorched. Its wings were more torn than before, but it was awake, and it was flying, and for the first time in 10,000 years no chain held it. It looked down at Daniel with its ancient eye, and through the array, in a voice tired but no longer broken, it spoke. "You stayed," Orethan said. "You could have run when the fire came. You stayed." "So did you," Daniel said. "You could have flown the second the last chain dropped. You came back for us." "That is what it means," the dragon said, "to be seen. Once you know someone is there, you cannot leave them behind. You taught me my own name was still mine. I could not repay that by letting you burn." Not far off, the grey hauler hung crippled in the light of its own ruined rig. The blast had caught its side and torn it open, and now it drifted, wounded, its engines dark, on a cracked screen somewhere inside it. Daniel imagined Bram staring out at the empty chains and the living dragon that had slipped through his hands. The radio crackled one last time, weak and full of hate. "This is not over, engineer," Bram's voice said. "You have freed one beast. There are 1,000 more in our tanks and 1,000 chains still to fill. The consortium does not forget. We will hunt you across every star." Daniel looked at the broken ship, and then at the dragon whose name he carried, and he found he was not afraid. "Then you'd better learn their names first," he said into the radio, "because from now on, they've got someone who knows how to teach them." He cut the channel. Nala drifted close, staring at the great creature above them. "Where do we go now?" she asked. Orethan lowered one wing toward them, an old and gentle gesture, an offer of passage. "Come," the dragon said. "There is a place where the last free ones still wait in silence. It is time they learned that the silence can end." The place had no name on any chart, because the people who made charts had never been meant to find it. Orethan carried Daniel and Nala there through a field of dead stars, old suns burned down to cold embers, where the dark was so deep it felt like a held breath. And in that dark, waiting, were the dragons. There were dozens of them. They hung among the dead stars with their wings folded, still and silent, scales gone dull from long stillness. These were the last free ones, the dragons that had escaped the tanks and the chains and had hidden themselves so completely that the galaxy believed them gone. They did not sing. They did not speak. They had learned long ago that to be noticed was to be caught, and so they had chosen silence, and the silence had lasted a very long time. As Orethan drew near, the others stirred. Great eyes opened all across the dark, turning toward the newcomer and the small warm shapes it carried. Daniel felt those eyes on him and understood how a single ant must feel under the gaze of a crowd. He had never been so small. He had never mattered so much. One of the dragons came forward. It was even larger than Orethan, its scales pale as bone, its movements slow with great age. When it spoke, Daniel's array caught the words and turned them into a voice like stone grinding on stone. "You return," it said to Orethan. "We felt you taken, we mourned you as lost. No one returns from the chains. What is this you bring with you, pray, or worse, one of the takers?" "Neither," Orethan said. "This is the one who spoke my name." A stir ran through all the dragons at once, a ripple of shock across the dead stars. The pale elder went very still. "That is not possible," it said. "In 10,000 years no one has spoken our names. The takers do not ask. They cannot ask. To ask would be to see us, and if they saw us, they could not do what they do." He asked, Orethan said. He listened for 5 days until his soft human throat could shape the sound. "He cut the drills before he knew what I was. He freed me before he knew if I would eat him for it. And when the fire came, he did not run. He stayed with me, and I stayed with him. Elder, I have carried my name alone for 10,000 years. Now there is another who carries it. That has not happened since the world was young." The pale elder lowered its great head until its eye was level with Daniel, so close that Daniel could see the tiny fires of the dead stars reflected in it. He did not look away. He had learned, days ago in a broken ship, that you did not look away from a dragon. You looked back. "Small thing," the elder said. "Speak, so I may hear it." Daniel's mouth was dry. He thought of everything that had brought him here, the storm and the chains and the quiet click of his cell door in the dark. He straightened, and he spoke the name he had learned, clear and steady, into the waiting silence. "Orethan." The word rolled out among the dead stars, and the dragons heard it, and for the first time in an age none of them were silent. A sound rose from them all together, deep and vast, a sound Daniel felt in his chest more than heard. It was not a roar. It was closer to weeping and closer still to song. When it faded, the pale elder spoke again, and its stone voice had changed. "We chose silence to survive," it said. "We told ourselves that no one would ever see us, and so we hid and grew quiet and small. But here is a creature no larger than a claw who saw one of us across the dark and gave him back his name. If one of them can do this, then we were wrong to believe none of them ever would." It lifted its head to look at all the others, and then back at Daniel and Nala. "The age of silence is over," the elder said. "The takers will learn that their gold has voices, and this human will be the bridge, for he has done the one thing none thought possible. He has proven a taker's kind can also be a namer's kind." Then slowly, Orethan turned to Daniel and did a thing no dragon had done to any other species in the memory of the world. It spoke a new sound, soft and rolling, and it gave that sound to the elders as a gift. "This is his name," Orethan said. "Daniel, learn it. He earned it as I earned his ear. Let it be the first human name our kind has ever chosen to remember." And the dragons spoke it back, dozens of ancient voices shaping the simple sound of a salvage engineer's name, until it echoed among the dead stars like something holy. Later, when the great voices had quieted, Daniel floated beside Orethan at the edge of the sanctuary, looking out at the dark, where somewhere Bram's crippled ship still limped home full of hate and promises of war. Nala had gone among the dragons, and Daniel could hear her laughing softly with wonder for the first time. He should have felt afraid. The consortium would come. The tanks were still full. The chains still waited. But he did not feel afraid. He felt, for the first time in his hard and lonely life, that he was exactly where he was meant to be. "Of all the gold they ever tore from my body," Orethan said quietly beside him, "none of it was ever worth anything. It was only ever weight in another creature's hands. But you, small thing, you learned my name. You are the only treasure I have ever owned that was truly mine." Daniel smiled up at the ancient eye. "You gave me more than that," he said. You showed me the dark is never as empty as it looks. There's always somebody out there waiting to be seen. All you have to do is learn to say their name. And in the field of dead stars, the last free dragons began, at last, to sing.